don't know who always invites that person.
Somebody's there.
Okay, we are live.
It's exactly 10:30.
Okay, I'll call the meeting of the neighbors of Dunn County to order. With the roll show, everyone is here today with the chair, with Chair Bartlett and others. Everyone, I'm sure, has had a chance to read the minutes. Is there any questions? Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve. Are there any questions on them? Hearing none, all those say aye that approve.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Carried. Okay, as far as I know, we have one public comment. Dr. Brown? I don't think there was any others, right there.
Oh, thanks. I was going to put this off till October announcing this, but and the neighbor staff knows, but I'm going to be retiring in October. I was going to retire at the end of the year, but I realized that my medical license expires at the end of October. And it seemed like a good time to do it. And I'm not sure exactly when it started at the Dunn County Healthcare Center, but I think it was at least by 1980. So I've worked here 40 years or more. And the reason when I retired from the clinic in the hospital 7 years ago, the reason I want to continue here was because this is just an outstanding facility. It's outstanding staff. 4 of the 5 nurses, best nurses I've ever worked with are here. Paula and our 3 assistant clinical mentors. The 5th nurse would be my wife. And it's not just the nurses, it's the department heads. I've worked in 6 different nursing homes. I've been medical director at 3, and there is no comparison between neighbors and other facilities. And part of that is, I mean, part of the reason I think it is such a good facility is because of the board. One of the reasons when we had residents working here that I wanted them to attend one of these meetings was to see how local government works. I mean, it actually works compared to state and federal governments. You know, you're all here because you care about your community. You're not here to make money or move up the ladder. So I really applaud you for that. With all that being said, in discussions with the nurses and Paula, I feel like neighbors is kind of at an existential tipping point right now regarding staffing. The core staff, they're having to work nights, weekends, holidays. And to give you an idea of what we're going up against, one of our assistant clinical mentors, Katya, her daughter recently graduated from nursing school, and she started working in Hudson, and she's making the same salary as her mother, who's been here 25 years and is the head of the entire building. So I don't know how a county facility competes, you know, against the Marshfields and the Mayo Clinics and the Purveyors. I don't have any solutions, but you know, I think we're, and I don't want to contradict anything Carmen might say, but it sounds like we may be close to having to close other neighborhoods here. All of a sudden, maybe even an entire building, because we simply don't have the staff. And say I don't have solutions. I don't. But to expect Paula to continue to keep plugging holes, you know, she's only got so many fingers to stick in the dike. I think we're kind of reaching dire straits. That's all I have. Again, you have no idea how much I've enjoyed my time here. I mean, that's the only reason I've continued practicing is because I love working here. The staff here are some of the best friends I have. So thank you.
Okay. More of the public comments, so we'll go to the department's report.
Thank you. So first on my report today is the introduction of two new department heads at the Neighbors. So we have two new staff that recently started in the last couple of weeks. I believe they're with Chris Anderson. So we have our new life enhancement mentor and our new culinary mentor. So Alyssa Dowdy has been with us for about a month and a half, probably, I think, as the life enhancement or life enrichment mentor. And then Dave Drager is our new culinary mentor, who's in his third week, I believe. So they're on the screen there. I don't know if you guys want to say anything or just put a face to the name, but they are new department heads at the Neighbors.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
All right. The next agenda item is the Quality Assurance Steering Committee updates. So as always, we met for quality assurance this month. We went over our quality metrics. So that's a quarterly report that we get from CMS that goes over anything that might be flagging of being outside of the normal ranges. For example, if a building has more falls than what the state or national average is, that might flag, or infections, decline in cognition, decline in physical ability, things like that are all on those reports, and they go every quarter. So it's actually looking back from previous quarters versus real-time data. So we go over those when those come out. And then we also went over our pharmacy report. So our pharmacist gives us reports also on a quarterly basis that then we then review at Quality Assurance Steering Committee just to look at if we have anything above the norm for psychotropics, anything outside of the norm for antibiotics, making sure that we're following all of the recommendations from the pharmacist. And then if there's, for some reason, we aren't doing a recommendation that they have, that we have physician reasoning to do so. So we reviewed those. There wasn't anything out of the norm in any of those. We also looked over the plan of correction for the life safety code survey. As you might remember, last month we went over that we had a health and life safety code survey in the East building. The health survey had 0 citations. The life safety code did have 3 minor citations. So we submitted a plan of correction to the state, and that was accepted. So we did go over that in quality assurance. There is a change to how plan of corrections are submitted and approved by the state from what previously to COVID. So this was our first time going through that process, and it seemed to go smoothly. Instead of just writing a plan of correction, submitting it, and they trust us that we did it, we actually have to show proof that we did it. So for example, one of the citations was that a grade change from a sidewalk in an entrance was too much. There's a bit of a lip there. So that was one of the citations. So for proof of that, we sent a picture of it being fixed. So before we just had to say fixed on this date, now we have to actually prove that it was before our plan will be accepted. So it did work. All of our citations were accepted as corrected. It was just the first time going through that process. If we had larger citations, I think it would be a little bit more in depth. It was nice to have a couple of minor ones to try that new process out on. So any questions on quality assurance? Okay. Next is the employment activity report. So I will have Chris start that one off.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So in your packet, the employment report is in there for June. Types of recruitment is the normal. NeoGov, the county website, and we did a Facebook push this time around. And we go down to the Number of interviews scheduled, we had 10 scheduled. That's in-house interviews, that's not including agency interviews. Number of interviews held was 8. We had 2 no-shows for interviews. Positions offered was 8 for the month of June. Accepted were 7. 4 of those carried over into the first part of July for start dates. Positions offered at higher than a step 3 would be 0, and that's simply because there was no nurse applications during that time. We offered 7 positions, and then on the flip side, we had 7 resignations. We had a part-time homemaker refused to work weekends. A part-time RN accepted a job at Dove. A part-time LPN graduated with her RN license. She accepted a job at Sacred Heart. Another part-time LPN graduated as an RN and she accepted a job at Mayo. We have a part-time CNA, became self-employed through the IRIS program. Another part-time CNA, no real reason given. And then another part-time CNA, she was quite part-time. She just wanted to spend the summer with her family. So open positions wise, we go down and it's changed with the number of terms and whatnot. We have 6 the FTE open positions for RNs. We have no agency RN hours for June. We have 3 LPN positions that are filled with agency, and it's down from last month for CNA. We have 10 CNA positions filled with agency. We skip down to active leave of absences. That's down for the moment. We have the 4 educational related. Some people are taking some summer classes. We have 2 part-time CNAs on unpaid military leave. A full-time CNA out on medical leave for self. CNA out on a medical leave of absence, and a homemaker out on a medical leave of absence. For June, it was good. We had no work comp lost hours. And then for June, I forgot to change that from May to June. COVID-19 missed shifts for like exposures or that type of thing was down to 29 shifts. They're roughly 296 hours. It's kind of a mix between 8s and 12, so it's an approximate number with that. Carmen, did you?
Yeah, I just had a couple other updates in relation to this as well. So I know something that we've talked quite a bit about was the nurse aid training program. As I mentioned last month, we did get information back from the state. We have started the application process for that. We've done kind of the basic application process, so filling out all the forms, sending all of those in. The next step is actually writing a curriculum for it. When we had a CNA training program in the past, we had someone come in that already was part of kind of her own employed school and then taught at our facility. So it wasn't necessarily our own training program, as well as the training programs have now switched from being 120 hours to 75 hours. That was part of COVID. That was an initiative that went through a long time ago and actually was vetoed. But then through COVID, they did actually switch it to that and then made it stick basically going forward. So we do have to write a new curriculum for that. So that's a bit more of an undertaking. And we do have a nurse starting next week who has run a program before. So once she starts, we'll actually probably be asking her for some assistance in writing that curriculum. So that's where we're at on that process. That's the next step. We have to write a pretty in-depth curriculum of what all they're going to be taught, how many hours they're taught each thing, where they're being taught. Is it just classroom? Is it classroom and on the floor? So a very in-depth program. So hopefully once we have that nurse who has actually done so before, we'll get a little bit further on that process. Another thing that we talk a lot about is the CNA students from CBTC. They are coming back again for that. I know Chris mentioned that we didn't offer anything over a 3 for this month. We have had several nurse applications in July. So this data is all from June since we go month to month. and all of which have requested a higher wage. So we have processed a lot of those through that process of requesting higher than a step 3. And then we have gotten back a lot of, I don't know if good is the right word, but a lot of feedback on our exit interview forms over the last couple of weeks or months. I'd say we're getting more information back on them than just the generic responses we had previously gotten back. And a lot of those, when it comes to nurses, we're just not able to compete with Mayo for wage, as well as things like they do every 3rd weekend versus our every 2 or every other weekend, and then things like holidays as well. So for Mayo, they're currently only working 2 holidays a year. We do every other holiday a year. So and for part-time people, they're not necessarily guaranteed any holiday off if we need to fill. Our full-time have every other, as well as every other weekend instead of every 3rd. And then of course, the wage, that's what we've been seeing for nurses. And then for CNAs, basically burnout, overworked, things like that, in relation to a lot of our PM CNAs, which we've talked about over the past couple of months with the homemaker discussion about just having too much to do, and then also just working short-staffed. The more and more we have people resign, the more and more they're working short-staffed, and then that adds more frustration, and it's just kind of a evolving door at that point. So it's nice to get the feedback back so we have something to go off of, but obviously it's not great feedback. So that's kind of where we're going with that. And I know this kind of leads into referral. I think Paula has something else to say as well, but we are currently, and this is the first time we've had to do this in quite some time, due to how short-staffed we are for CNAs. We have actually gotten to the point where we have to turn down referrals. We do not have another household closed at this point. We are keeping Fireside open, but Fireside is only being staffed with 1 CNA, which has us down to 9 residents in that household. So we are holding at about a 111 census right now, which is much below what we would like to be at. But if we don't have the staff to care for people, we can't responsibly admit people and then have liability issues as well, as state problems with that too. So.
I have one question. In June, I see didn't have any RNs. Agencies, that's because they weren't available? Okay.
We're having a really hard time getting agency staff in all positions, actually.
Okay.
They aren't available for anywhere. We've been asked to have higher wages for agency staff, things like that. Even when we did talk about that with the agencies, they don't have enough staff either, as well as they're more interested in going places that are near fun places, I guess, people that are traveling all over the country. Some of the responses we got was everyone wanted to go to Florida or Tennessee or somewhere with something a little more lively than Menominee, Wisconsin. So that's the other thing that we're competing with agencies as well, as it's not only money, it's also draw to the area. I mean, we are semi-close to the Twin Cities, but not necessarily close enough that that would be a draw.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just want to make sure I understood that. So if we could, we would fill the 6 RN positions. We would fill the LPN positions, but we can't even with the agencies.
Correct.
Okay.
Right now, we would fill those positions. We wouldn't necessarily, if we're keeping our census at what it's at right now, not necessarily all of them. If we had Arrowhead and Fireside full, that this is what fully staffed would be those 6 positions, the 5.1 part-time LPNs, and then the 5.1 full-time LPNs, and then the 31.7 CNAs. If without any agency, that's what our open holes are. And then those agencies are in red, but that would be if we were fully staffed for all 9 households being open, as that's what we budgeted for 2021, was having all 9 households open. So our staffing numbers on there are as per budget.
Can I,
Yeah, go ahead. Paula, go ahead.
Are we on Zoom?
We're on Zoom.
Okay.
We're on- Yep.
So one, I apologize for not being here for last month's meeting. It's something that I had to do, and I thoroughly appreciate Carmen for what she has been saying and also what Dr. Brown had said. But I also was going to speak up today, just saying that it is really a struggle out there right now. All of us are struggling. Carmen had talked about Fireside having 9 residents and 1 CNA. We also have Deerview Manor in the central building who has 15 residents and there's 1 CNA. On AMs, they do have a homemaker. On PMs, they don't have anybody extra. So that's 15 residents for 1 CNA to do the cooking, cleaning, housekeeping, resident cares, all of that. The CNAs that we have here are absolute miracle workers. They can get this stuff done and they're going nonstop. If you're out there working with them, they're sweating. Sweat's just rolling down their face, and I get it. You're working outside, you're sweating too, but this is inside taking care of people. We have resident cares that are not getting done as well as they used to be. And part of that is our restorative programs. So when we have residents that are not on Medicare anymore, and they're just a long-term care resident, they have what they call restorative programs. And that's what kind of drives our revenue with that. We get paid more money for the more restorative services that we do give to residents. This past 3 months, some of that information or some of the amount of restorative or cares that were given to residents have actually declined because the staff just haven't had time to give that care to the residents. So that is actually flagged on the CASPER reports that the surveyors look at and they review before they come to the facility. So they will know before they even come to the facility that some of these things have not been done and for how long. So they can monitor all of that because that's how we drive our revenue. So as I mentioned, this report that they give is always a month behind. And I've tried to kind of say things about that previously in other meetings. But so far this month, we've had 3 RN resignations. We've had 2 of them are full-time and 1 of them is a part-time RN. Granted, she's just a new nurse and she wants to go and try different things, but they are going to Mayo and say for the same reasons that Carmen had said. It's the wages, it's the holidays, it's the working. They don't work as hard in the hospital. As I had said previously in one of the meetings, a nursing home nurse is really a special type of nurse. They aren't specifically oncology. They aren't specifically cardiology or urology or anything like that. A nursing home nurse covers all of it. They have to know everything about all the residents inside and out. So when we call Dr. Brown or call Dr. Nagler, we can give them a rundown of everything that's happened with the resident. In the hospital, they have nurses for each individual situation that's kind of going on. So the nurses work extremely, extremely hard. Just in the past couple of weeks, we've had 5 more CNA resignations. I just received another one last night, another one for a full-time CNA. As Carmen had mentioned, I've been trying to get agency. That alone takes time to be on the phone, trying to get people to come in, trying to call to find out if they have any staff members to work. They do not. As of August 1st, we will be losing 25% more of our current staff we have right now due to leaves, going to college, things like that. So that's 25% more of our staff that will be gone. I know that I totally get it. It's a financial sustainability thing. And I admit I'm nervous myself about this. The staffing or the way that the facility is laid out is very hard for staffing or hard for sharing one person between 2 houses at a time, because it's like somebody has to physically be in a house at all times. And due to the layout, you have to have somebody in every house, even though maybe there's a lower amount of census. Technically, if we were just one wing, technically we would be able to have like one nurse and possibly 2 CNAs in Central alone right now, instead of having 2 nurses and trying to have 3 CNAs, which has been null and void. Chris and I have been going every morning and getting people up in some of the houses. We've been doing the laundry, we've been doing, you name it, we've been doing everything that we can to try to help the residents and staff out. We spend numerous hours a day just kind of curtailing some of the staff's frustrations and fears of, what's happening. Are we going to make it? How come we have to work like this? The list goes on and on and on. I told myself I wouldn't cry, but it's just really frustrating. And I know that staff is hard to find in the first place, but I really think that we need to try to find something to get staff to come to the neighbors. The neighbors used to be a place where people wanted to work. Yes, the pay was higher, the benefits were great. Now people can go elsewhere to get more, of both of those. Yeah, I don't know if anybody would want to talk to me. Otherwise, it's fine, but I think I'm done. Sorry.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Carmen, are all of our staffing problems fixed if we pay higher salaries?
I do not think so.
No.
I would not say all of them. I would say it would be helpful. I think it would be unrealistic to say all of them, because no matter how high of a salary we pay, there's simply just a CNA and nursing shortage. So yes, our situation is very difficult right now. And I would say we are not alone. One of the local nursing homes is down to 16 beds, and it's normally a 50-bed building. So we are not alone in this. So no matter how high we pay people, I think we need to adjust the salaries and everything, but I think it is unrealistic to say that it would fix everything.
So we do have the class and comp study that's being done. The committee might also be interested in hearing that we are discussing adjusting the salaries on, I think it's 3 nurses to move them up to step 5. We are routinely hiring, when we do get to hire RNs, at step 5 or more, depending on their, even with comparatively little experience, because that's what the market is driving. So we can fully expect the class and comp study to show that our wages for RN CNAs need to be raised next fiscal year. But I think it's important, as part of the evaluation this committee will do, is to bear in mind what Carmen just said. Even presuming we can pay a better wage, a competitive wage, that in combination with the retirement, which is the one benefit that government employees have, a pension that most private sector does not. They'll offer a 401k or something like that, but not a pension. Even with that pension, is that going to be enough given the shortage on RNs and LPNs? Is it going to be enough to keep us afloat? And I'm not saying it's not. I don't know, but I think it's important for this committee in its evaluation, especially as we are approaching the fiscal year 22 budget evaluation, which this committee will take up next month, to take that long-term sustainability question. And it's not a surprise for the neighbors. The issue is staffing. We've got a good facility. We've got good programs. We've got good meals. The issue is staffing. And it's important, I think, that, again, that this committee look at the very long term in terms of the viability and our ability to sustain this operation. And if we choose to do so, because it is entirely a matter of prioritization, where do the priorities lie with the county board? What else in the entire gamut of what this county does for services and programs, what else might end up having to be sacrificed? Thank you.
The only thing I would also add to that is I know we are seeing an even greater trend. This has been something we've talked about quite a bit of younger people not, I don't know if it's not understanding or not appreciating or caring about, I guess, is kind of more the county benefits and the pension plan. They're way more concerned about here and now wages versus benefits. It's just a shift in mindset, I believe, especially as being a CNA has been traditionally been more of a career position versus now it's a stepping stone to something else. Even today we had someone that interviewed who asked about wages and originally came in wanting full-time and didn't want full-time because they make less money than our part-time staff. Makes more money for in lieu of fringe, even though when you calculate it out, the full-time, the amount of money you get in paid days off, the pension, everything else is technically actually more overall value if you calculate it into dollars. But the people who are interviewing now don't see that. They would rather have dollars on a check instead of value in other forms of either days off or pension or healthcare. So it's also a mind shift in that as well, that she's willing to work a 0.6 instead of full-time because it's more dollars per hour.
No, but I can understand that.
Any other questions related to staffing?
I have a question, I just have a comment. That I was probably the same way, but the younger people coming into these jobs, they don't understand that what retirement is. They don't understand what a benefit it is. So how many of them will get the kind of annuity that I have? Probably not. You know, from being a county employee for so many years, but they just don't understand. You don't think about retirement when you're 20 years old.
Right.
So,
If I may.
Sure.
I don't think younger people ever thought about retirement. I think we've gotten away
I didn't.
paying,
I did.
keeping up our wages with
No,
everybody else
After Catherine years ago.
because of the levy limits. You know, we have to make tough decisions on prioritization,
You could quit
and
those.
we're doing, everything we do is good in the county, but we have to get back to paying a fair wage to our employees. And the retirement system has always been a method of retention. After they've been here a few years, they realize that, hey, this is a good benefit. And that retains your employee. But to get the employee, you have to pay as much as everybody else. And that's what we did, you know, I think way before I got on the county board, which is more than 20 years now, we were paying a fair wage to people when they came to work for the county. Used to, you know, when I was in private business, it was tough for me to pay as much as the county paid. But that's a long time ago. And through, you know, through the years, it's gotten a lot easier for the private sector to keep up paying for the county because the county's been under levy limits and they've been cutting they haven't been keeping up with the wages. And we have done a couple of studies, but I don't think we've gone far enough. And, you know, we keep thinking the benefits should be a big deal, but it isn't. It's a big deal for retention, but it isn't a big deal to get the people in the door to come to work. And I think this year, as I've said before, is we're going to have to prioritize what we're going to do. We can't keep doing everything. we're gonna have to make some cuts. We're gonna have to make some tough decisions.
I agree.
Mr. Chair, if I may add one other thing, and in response to what Chairman Bartlett just said, we did a comp class study in 17 that adjusted our pay grid by 7% in 18. So I think that the RN, LPN, CNA issue is unique in that because of the small pool of candidates, that compensation is exploding in terms of cost, much greater than perhaps some of the other positions. But it's a fact that we've got to deal with. We've got to be aware of. So I don't think we've been remiss, and I don't think Chairman Bartlett was suggesting we have, in trying to keep pace. But compared to every other position, I suspect that the pace for compensation for those in the medical profession is outstripping all the others.
And it's fine to look at it for the next fiscal year. But what are we gonna do about today? That's the problem. There's a, go ahead.
Did Paula have something else she wanted to add a minute ago?
She's muted at the moment, so we wouldn't know. There you go.
What was, yeah.
We were muted. Sorry.
I did have something and now I can't quite exactly remember what that was, other than I do agree that just, increasing wages, isn't going to bring everybody in because there is a shortage of staff. But if it were there, I don't know, like Dave had said, there's just so many emotions going through my head that it's hard to comprehend. So
I think what Paul is trying to say, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it can only help. I don't know it will fix everything, but it's not going to hurt the situation.
Well, if we were paying $2 an hour more than the surrounding businesses, we would be more likely to get
Correct.
more employees than we are now.
Correct.
And after they've been here for 2 years or maybe 5 years, then they'll realize that the benefits are retention to stay. And I kind of disagree with Mr. Miller. I don't think it's just the nursing facility that we have this problem. Because I know people that are in the trucking industry with dump trucks, and they're paying more than we are with our people that are driving our trucks. Mechanics over at Kenworth are $35 an hour. We have no mechanics that are close to that. Our benefits are a lot better. When it comes to the highway department, they have 4 days a week. They work just days usually. It's different. But you take the private sector that's open on the weekends, 24/7 at these big shops, they're making big money. And our truck drivers are making big money compared to what the county is. So it isn't just, I don't agree that it's just this. I think the nursing profession, yes, there's such a shortage that combines it, makes it worse. But I think there's other areas in the county that we're not paying as much either as the private sector.
Even if we were up to par to everything else, there isn't the people out there to fill these positions.
No, that's the tough thing. But as I said, I remember when I was, in the private sector, and I lost 2 of my best mechanics to go to Chippewa County. And the first one I lost throughout my many years working there, and I thought we had a good place to work, but the first one I lost was my transmission man. He was an excellent mechanic. Chippewa County had him changing oil, doing tires, and exhaust work on their police cars, and paying him more than what we could pay him. Plus the benefits was a retention, and he stayed there and retired.
Yeah.
And I've actually, I have had 3 that went chip and pound.
Kelly?
Yeah, I was going to make a similar point to Dave, so I'll expand on it a little bit with highway and transit. Um, there are cycles. When we had the sand mine boom, it was very, very hard for us to hire anyone to drive a bus. And it was hard to get people in at the for plow drivers as well. And that was because at that point we were having a wage spike in that segment. The thing that we were getting is we were getting people in their late 20s, early 30s, early 40s who were seeing that the benefits mattered to them. And that's tough. And especially with the nursing shortage, where what we desperately need is the new people coming in. They aren't making those decisions.
And just to clarify, I didn't mean to imply that our only area of expanded salary demands is RNs, LPNs, CNAs. That's why we're doing a comp class study. That's across the board. We recognize that since the last one we did was in 17, it's time to update it. And we expect there to be increases in many areas. I just think the shortage in our medical candidates to fill those medical positions is particularly acute.
Yeah, it's certainly where it's worse right now.
Also, if I may.
I just have one other comment, if I could.
Sure, right after Sarah.
And then
Okay.
Sarah, you want to pull your microphone toward you.
I was just gonna say that years ago, and I don't know if it's changed a lot, but this kind of work is not valued as highly as a lot of other jobs.
Hmm.
I mean, when you consider what we pay here, and it's far better than when I worked here. But you know, if you go get a job that's half as stressful, you don't have to work half as hard. You get weekends off, you get holidays off, and people feel valued, but people don't always feel valued in this kind of a position. It may be better now, but I can remember years ago when it just felt like, you know, no one really cared.
Paula?
Okay, sure. So one other thing I was just going to say why I think that the neighbors has been, so great and things like that for so long is that we had so much longevity where people, like Dave was saying, they would come in, they would work for a period of time, and then they get involved and just kind of like that's where they want to work. And so we have all this longevity. That longevity is really not really there anymore. The people that have probably been here probably 10 years is probably much less than what it is for the people that have been just starting, if that makes sense. The longevity is what makes a great nursing home or which makes a great facility, because you're training people to be how you were or how you want them to be. We now have agency training agency. An agency does not get a full orientation. We give them way more orientation than what other facilities give, just because we want the residents to get good care. We want the staff to know what they're doing when they get here to work. So it's just one more thing. And I mean, I think you guys get it, but I just wanted to mention that. So
If I could add on that a little bit, I think that's another mindset shift of, I don't know if it's a generational change or what it might be. But even one of the people who is leaving to go to one of the hospitals made a comment about, well, we'll see if I'm even there in 5 years. So I think it's not just, I think it's a mindset shift of wherever has the next best thing. And so it's okay. So people are always looking. I had another nurse say that to me. She goes, well, I'm not like trying to leave, but I mean, I'm always looking. So it's just wherever has the next best thing. So I think it's maintaining us staying the best thing is what's important on top of that too, instead of allowing other people to have something else to go somewhere else to have something better, I guess. So I think that's another mindset change about it used to be people, they were happy where they were, so they stayed instead of constantly looking. So that's another thing that we're kind of up against, I would say.
Yes, Steve.
There's a mindset too, a little bit that If you're
Steve, you might want to pull your
25.
microphone.
20, 25 years old, that if those benefits are really going to be there in 30 years. I think there's a lot of doubt in that.
There's a lot of research on that and a lot of research on the changing mindset, and I won't try and bring that in here because it'll just make this meeting much longer to not a lot of purpose, but yeah.
Anything else on that subject?
All right, we'll go on to the referral activity report. So as I had mentioned before, we are now having to turn down referrals due to staffing. That is not reflective on this report. That is more of a recent in the last couple of weeks in July. So next month will look a little bit different. But so this will still look like it was before. We started the month with 114. We had 52 referrals to the facility. 27 of them were admitted. 25 were admitted, 27 were not. We had 5 that went to their first choice, 2 went to swing bed, and 3 to a facility closer to home. We had 1 went to or was out of network with insurance. We had 5 that were severe behavioral health issues or legal issues. We had 1 over our weight limit. 4 passed away at the hospital, and 9 went home. And we had 2 people that had no form of payment or insurance. We ended the month at 107 residents. We did have 7 deaths, which is up from our normal. And we had 25 people discharge home. So it was a big month for discharges as well. That can kind of come and go based on how months fall. So if people discharged at the first day of the month, that can change that as well. We are up to 111 right now. So we're a little bit higher than the end of June. But that's kind of where we are staying at this point due to staffing. It is the outer 2 buildings are pretty much full. And then Deerview is full, and Central currently has 9 residents, which is kind of where we are. I don't want to use the word stuck, but that's where we're kind of leveling out at with availability to take care of the people. Our referral sources were the same as always: Eau Claire, Mayo, and Eau Claire, Menominee, and Rochester, all 3 Mayo facilities. Any questions on referrals?
Scott is with us.
Yep, next is environmental and facilities reports. So Scott.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Can everybody hear me okay?
No, just kidding. Of course we.
The funny guy in the crowd. Not a huge amount going on in facilities, environmentals. We had RF Technologies that handles our nurse call system work with our IT department to get it set up so that RF Technologies can have remote access to the system, which will provide us better service in issues that we have with the nurse call system. They can access remotely by computer as opposed to waiting like 4 hours for them to get here, which should give us some quicker turnaround on repairs of our nurse call system. They did find a cheaper way of doing this, so that's going to save some money, which is a good thing. Carmen touched on the plan of corrections for the sites on the survey. One was the concrete sidewalks approaches. We were able to do the repairs in-house, lifting the concrete up, getting it where it needs to be. The rest of the facility will be checked over and prior to the next surveys, so that there aren't any issues of that. And then the other issue was the fire extinguishers. Josh started a spreadsheet so that he has the dates of when the testing of or inspection of the fire extinguishers is done in-house. So that'll be able to be provided to the surveyor or the engineer when they come around. And then we also have the tags now that are on the fire extinguishers, which are a 4-year tag. So those will be looked at for the next 4 years, but the spreadsheet will cover us if anything happens to those tags, if they get thrown away again, anything like that. Other than that, we're going through work orders and repairing as needed, keeping up with the grounds, the grass, weeds, all that stuff, trying to make the facility look as nice as possible. All the guys are working very hard on that. That is all I have. Anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I do, Scott.
Yes.
Only every 4 years is all you need to check the fire extinguishers?
No, what they do is they put a 4-year tag on there.
Oh, so you got to check them, what is it, every 6 months, every
No,
year?
we check them monthly. There's a monthly
Monthly?
inspection.
Okay,
Monthly, we check them, and then what they can do is, what happened was there were tags that were on the fire extinguishers, and they get punched every month when they're inspected. So as long as the tag is on the fire extinguisher, you can reference that and see when it's been inspected. Well, the tags got all punched, and our fire extinguisher guy went ahead and swapped out the tags. He didn't save the old tags for us to reference. So there's nothing to reference on. So now we're doing the spreadsheet to have something to reference just in case.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
It was just unlucky timing with the survey that it was right after he came by to collect the old tags. So
Yes, very
be a
unlucky.
problem every 4 years. Any other questions for Scott? Okay. Next is the COVID-19 update. I don't have a lot under this that directly pertains to the neighbors, just that there has been an uptick in COVID in our region as well as our county. And it's primarily due to the Delta variant, which has become the prominent variant of the disease. So we are keeping an eye on that. We are not to the point that it's high enough that it changes any of our protocols at this point, but we are getting closer to that. So if that did happen, that could change things like visitation. It could change testing, could change a few different things that might happen if we get high enough above the 5% positivity rate, or if we even get above the 10% positivity rate. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but it is something that we constantly are monitoring just in case, because it could change what we do on a day-to-day basis. As well as that it is still prevalent, that nursing homes still are going into outbreak status. We have been very fortunate, knock on wood, that we have not been in an outbreak in a long time. I believe March was our last time in an outbreak, but it could happen. There was a nursing home in our general region that actually not only had a staff member test positive, but also had a resident test positive last month. So it's just on the forefront of our minds that it is still possible that we could still have an outbreak situation. That being said, we are encouraging all staff that haven't gotten vaccinated to get vaccinated. Paula recently sent out a reminder about that, as well as where to get vaccinated, either here at Public Health, at the clinics. Almost all of the pharmacies have it now, so it is a bit widely available. So we're strongly encouraging people to get vaccinated. It has come up as a topic on multiple calls about mandatory vaccination. Unfortunately, that is just not a position that we are able to do right now due to the staffing concerns we already have. That if it was something that all nursing homes are going to require or all healthcare facilities were going to require, it would be a little bit easier. But if it's just us, that's just another reason to go somewhere else. So that is not something we are pursuing at this point. Any questions in relation to COVID?
I have a question.
Sure.
How do you feel that that would affect employment rate?
I think we're at such a critical employment situation right now already that we would have people resign if we said it was mandatory to get vaccinated. I have heard some pretty strong opinions on vaccination, especially if they were already considering leaving for whatever reason they might be. As I said earlier, it's seemingly that people are always looking. If they had nothing else holding them there, I could see that causing significant turnover as well. I have heard from other places, not in our region, But other places that have had mandatory vaccination, there was turnover. They said it wasn't as much as they anticipated. But at this point, we're at such a critical point that I don't think we could lose anybody, risk it for losing anybody more. So we are very fortunate. We did have a higher percentage of acceptance of the vaccine to begin with than the average skilled nursing facility. So we are very fortunate that we do have most of our most of our staff vaccinated. Nearly all of our residents are vaccinated. So we are in a little bit better of a starting point anyways than what we had seen across region and state and what we had heard from others. We were at about the 70 percentile for or 70% of our staff, over 90% of our residents. There's other places in our region as well as in the state that were below 50% for staff. So we're very fortunate that we had the majority of our people accept the vaccine.
Good.
Any other questions related to COVID?
Question, do you do regular testing now still?
Yep, so right now we are at monthly testing for unvaccinated staff. That would change if we had an outbreak, which would be any staff or resident testing positive. We would then have to test all staff on a weekly basis. That is, the testing frequency is all based on county positivity rate. So if the trend of increased positivity rate continues, we could go up to having every other week. If it goes above 5%, and then if it goes above 10%, it's a twice a week testing. So at this point, we're monthly testing on the first Wednesday of the month of any staff who are unvaccinated.
Would there still be funding for that then?
Currently, there is still funding for for testing. So we do get our tests from the state. So we order them from the state laboratory and then they ship them to us and we test and then we ship them back to them and they're the ones who actually process the tests. Right. Next is the PM Homemaker. We requested information. So in last month's meeting, I know we had discussed it was an action item, but since it was decided to have it more going forward for the 2022 budget due to time constraints, I put it on the regular report and then just have answers to the questions that were asked last time. So I have a bunch of numbers, so bear with me. The first question was the actual comparison between the cost of a CNA that is our staff versus a CNA who is agency staff. And these are all assumed numbers because it doesn't necessarily factor in overtime hours for either, which I did calculate the average for that as well further on. But so our staff, a fully realized cost of the median for a CNA, which would include either the in lieu of fringe or benefits. So the average cost of a CNA per hour for one of our county staff is $25.27 an hour. Agency without overtime, so just their flat rate, it's average cost of $45 an hour. So that's $20.73 more per hour for an agency staff member comparing to our staff. I did the calculations for both 2020 as well as 2021, since half of 2021 is just projected numbers. So it could get worse, it could get better, we don't really know. So I used a full year of 2020 and then projected for 2021. So if we got rid of, so I took the number of the 2073 of how much it costs more per hour to have agency staff, and then I calculated that times the actual hours in 2020 that were worked by agency staff, and that got us to $487,522.96. So that was the cost of having agency over our own just for CNAs in 2020. Per Supervisor McCullough's suggestion, I multiplied that by 30% and 10% to see how much we would save. If we reduced CNA usage of agency staff by 30% from 2020's numbers, that would get us down to $146,256.89 would be savings. If we went down 10%, it would be $48,752. That's for 2020. 2021 looks even worse for agency staff. So I did the exact same calculations, just projected it out through end of year of what if we continue at the same rate we are going right now for usage, what we would be using for the whole year. For a 30% reduction in agency staff, we would save $219,281.94. For a reduction of 10% in agency usage, we would save $73,093.98. So with the 2021 numbers, if we really did reduce it by 30%, we would save $219,000 plus a little bit more. And that is just with straight $45 an hour without calculating in any overtime. I also did calculate the cost of overtime for CNA, that is pool staff. So currently we have 10 pool staff that are CNAs. At overtime, they're making on average $67 per hour. When I say average is because we have multiple different agencies and they have different rates. So it's about $67 an hour. It's time and a half. If we said on average, which every week is different, if they worked 5 hours of overtime per week per aide is 260 hours of overtime a year. And then times that by $67 is $174,200 in just overtime costs if they work 5 hours per aide a week. And then if they worked 10 hours per aide a week, that same total gets up to $348,400. So I also took those and then said if we reduce that by 30% and 10%, with the 5 hours a week, if we reduce that by 30%, it's $52,000. If we reduce it by 10%, it's $18,000. With the higher 10 hours per week, if we reduce it by 10%, it would be $35,000 roughly. And by 30% a week, it would be $105,000 roughly, just in reducing overtime for the agency staff. I also then took into account the time that it takes to train and orientate a new CNA, as well as our turnover rate that we've been losing staff by. So on average, a CNA will be trained for 96 hours before they are independently on the floor. And that is a seasoned CNA. So if we have a brand new CNA, it might be longer than that because we want to make sure that they're capable of doing the job before we have them taking care of people on their own. So 96 hours would be 2 days of, we call it classroom or general orientation, where we're sitting in a room going over a PowerPoint of the neighbors. That's 2 days. And then 2 full weeks of orientation, 96 hours. I use the same figure for the total CNAs. It might be a little less than that since we hire CNAs lower, but to get the full amount of the benefits and everything. So with that 2527 times 96 per CNA, when they're orientating, just in the wages from orientation, we spend $2,425.92. With our current turnover rate for this year, we're projecting to have 41 CNAs turnover this year. So far, we've had 22 in that 6.5 months. So if you calculate that out for the full 12, it's 41. Just in the cost of orientating them is nearly $100,000. It's $99,462.72. So if we even reduce that by 30%, it's roughly $30,000. If we reduce that by 10%, it's $10,000. So in total, we have a bunch of different numbers there. All of them would be reductions. I took the 10 and 30% of them to have realistic numbers. The other training and orientation numbers that go into that is Chris Anderson's time that goes into doing the process of onboarding. His time, he said that he thinks he would probably average, and this is not including the actual orientation itself, but just doing the processing of the paperwork, the background checks, all of that is 3 hours per new hire. So if we had 41 people that we had to replace this year due to turnover, for him that equaled about 100, for 41 people, it equaled, it was 58 or $5,837. And then we multiplied that by That's per, I'm sorry, I'm losing track of my notes here. So it's $142 per person. And then we times that by the 41, so it was $5,837.58 that just went to that. So that's an additional cost that would go on to that. That was the overall numbers, I think, that was requested for costs that would actually go to savings potentially if we had the homemakers, of just the actual cost of turnover and filling those positions with full staff.
Ask you a favor.
Yeah,
Email that to the committee.
sure.
Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Cause you lost me after the first couple. so.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, I followed along pretty well. I think that if somewhere in the 25 to 30%, that's a pretty compelling case for the homemakers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Down at the 10%, it's a little bit less, but if and you have to make the assumptions, but that 30%, I think
Big
would
number.
pay for itself. I think it would be worth. Go ahead, Paul.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
I assume you were saying that it makes sense. The savings we might get in retaining 30% of the CNAs because of the presence of the PM homemakers, if it were 30% less turnover. But there's also the cost of the PM homemakers that eats into that.
Oh no, that's what I was
Savings.
saying, is that would offset.
So and to me, that's
Quick.
the question is that a wash?
No, it's not, because it also reduces burnout a lot.
Mm.
It takes a lot of stress off the staff.
Mhm.
I think financially, it would be pretty close to a wash. But I think in terms of morale and burnout, it would be and retention, it would be a huge long-term retention, particularly, it would be a huge difference.
As well as, I know we're focused on the staff because it's related to a staffing cost, but as well as resident satisfaction as well. We have had multiple comments about it. Even this week, we had a resident council in the West Building, and that was one of the things that was said by one and then echoed by everybody else, is that PMs is overworked. They need help. Why does day shift have someone helping them and PMs doesn't? Things like that. So it's also not only just the staff, it's also the residents are noticing a difference as well.
Yeah, that's really, because I think we have to make a decision here to forward to the board, largely based on the dollars. But I think that an important consideration for us when we're thinking about those dollars is also the impact, the psychological impact, the impact on burnout, the impact on quality of care. I mean, that argument is very compelling to me. It's just not the argument I get to make decisions on.
Right. As well as it also adds to the idea of, sure, throwing more money at things could help us get more staff. But there's also a point where there just aren't enough people. This is a position that I think we have a better chance of filling than some of those CNA positions. You don't need a license to do this position. I think we can market it to younger people, college age, high school age, that they're serving food, they're doing laundry, they're housekeeping. I think it's something that will have an easier time filling those positions comparatively to a CNA position that you need that certification. So it also kind of fills that hole too, of if we are still stuck in this spot where we cannot fill those CNA positions, at least they have someone else helping them, kind of thing, versus, sure, we're doing our best to have 2 CNAs on PMs in every single household and helping them out, working with that. But at the point where we just can't fill those spots, at least they have someone helping them. Because right now they're seeing they can't fill the spots, AMS has some help and PMs doesn't. And that's morale issues that we're dealing with that.
And we're still paying our CNAs above average, correct?
I would say it's getting less and less above average. We've, for the first time since I've been here, that I've heard staff come in and balk at the CNA wage. We haven't really heard that until recently. I think people are struggling just as much as we are with getting staff, and they're just paying whatever they can get people in the door for. At a private organization, it doesn't take as many steps to get to that point. But we have had, luckily we have, with the in lieu of fringe and things like that, been able to get people to come in. But for the first time, at least that I've known of, that we've had, when we say even with the in lieu of fringes, 17, $18 an hour roughly, People are saying that's what they're getting other places too. I do know other nursing homes, someone walks in the door, they say, I want $20 an hour. They're probably going to give it to them because they need the staff, and it doesn't take the same process that it does here to do that.
Steve, was overtime? And that figured in there too.
It wasn't in the first part, but then overtime was figured separately. Just because it's just kind of varies. It depends on how big the holes were that week. We try not to give agency overtime because it's so expensive. $67 an hour is a lot. So we try our hardest to not give them overtime, but it does happen. When Chris and I were kind of looking at the bills and invoices from agency to try to get a rough idea of what an average overtime would be for some, because some refuse. Some like, nope, I've come to work my 40 hours. That's what it is. And some want all the hours they can get because they're traveling from Kentucky. They live here. They have nothing else to do. They just want to work. So some people had 30 hours of overtime in a 2-week period, and some had none. So it just kind of depended. So we did it separately instead of in the overall bunch of money.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, one more thing. I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here with PM homemakers because I think it's important the committee look at all these angles. It is still a hope. The benefits in terms of quality of service and workload for the CNAs, I don't think is much in dispute that if we had PM homemakers. But in terms of turnover, it's a hope that the presence of PM homemakers would reduce it. We won't know unless we were able to try it. But it certainly is plausible that it has at the 10% or lower threshold, in which case our costs for this operation will go up.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Chair.
We don't do anything soon, we're gonna be in such a pickle that we're not gonna be able to bail ourselves out.
I agree.
And this is a start. And I don't know if just getting homemakers is enough. I thoroughly am convinced that we should be paying as much, or in this market, just like Carmen just said, if somebody walks in the door at a private facility and says, I want $20 an hour, they're going to get it because there's nobody walking in the door. And we have to accept that fact also. So we should, as far as I'm concerned, we should be looking at $1 or $2 an hour more than the average, than our competitors, and also be doing this homemaker thing. And I don't know, and I was all right with waiting until the end of the year with next year's budget with this. But after hearing what we've heard today from Dr. Brown and from Paula, I don't know if we can wait. And I know it's tough decisions, but I'm just throwing that out there that if we don't do something, and my feeling is if we don't do something before the end of the year, it might be too late. And at least this will try, do this. How soon is that class study going to be done? Wage and class study.
We don't expect to get those results till potentially late August.
That's what I thought. That's, I don't know. I think the neighbors is in a tough situation right now, and we may have to take action. Government moves slow, so
It does.
if we start moving right now, it's going to be 3 months down the road.
Right.
I'm just, man.
So you're thinking maybe possibly a special meeting, Dave, before the 21st? Because we don't have any action item on it today, of course.
Well, we're not going to have a county board meeting until until September anyway,
After the 28th.
Right.
to do any. So I think we should focus on, if we want to bring a recommendation to county board to do something, I think we should focus on bringing that to the September county board.
What you're talking about is a budget adjustment.
That's
So
right.
Yes.
there would need to be a budget adjustment for staff
Right.
for the projected costs of PM homemakers. We'd have to work backwards from the September county board meeting, which is when, if it passed, advertising and then onboarding to actual start dates to calculate that possible cost.
And I think the way to frame it would be to talk about, this is something we're talking about budgeting for next year. What we need to do, we need to start the process. If we're going to make this change in January or we're going to make the change with the new fiscal year, and we just decide we have to do it earlier.
Mhm.
But it is based on the numbers that we're thinking that we were going to bring forward for the next budget. I think in terms of the politics and being able to recommend it to the board, that's going to be the way it has to be framed.
So that would be, just so I'm clear, an action item for August meeting for this committee,
Yes,
and then an
Yes.
action item for then exec and county board in September.
that's correct.
Right. Yeah. There is neither in August, correct? It's neither a county board meeting nor an exec.
There is
There is
an
an
exec. There is
Special
an
meeting on the 11th.
That's a workshop though for the.
Would it,
And by the way, the neighbors will probably be on the workshop too. It's part of our budget. It's a budget workshop though.
so then would it make sense to have it in, well, but exec is a day before this meeting in August.
Well, it's a workshop.
So I was wondering if it would make sense to have it in August exec in case they come back with more questions to then forward again. Or,
I think that what this committee wants to do is, as soon as you can process your recommendation, and I would suggest on your regular scheduled meetings, do so.
Okay.
So
August.
put this item on your August
Yeah.
meeting, and we will process it through as quickly as possible.
That's the best.
Okay, I have a question. You had asked about a special meeting for this committee. The board meeting in July is the 28th.
Yes.
That's almost 2 weeks away. When's the executive committee meeting?
21st.
21st. Wouldn't it be possible to have a special committee meeting with this committee to recommend it to the executive committee? To have it done in July? I see, when Dave mentioned we need to do something fast, I've been thinking that for some time now, that list has been followed in the past too, Dr. Brown. But I'm not involved in the executive committee or how things would go. But is that an option? Do it in July.
I don't see any reason why not.
Kelly, you really have a good handle on this. It seems, the way people feel.
The meeting would have to happen on Monday, the 19th, or Tuesday, the 20th. There's insufficient time to give the 24 notice for it to happen tomorrow. So you're
Okay.
talking Monday or Tuesday for a special meeting. That presumes that the numbers can be crunched and the actual budget adjustment request clarified between now and then. That puts Carmen and our finance division under the gun to produce that turnaround very quickly. And I'm going to, I can almost hear Keith Stray talking at a time when they are massively buried by trying to do the budget for the county, which is due on the 28th as well, pulling everything together. So it is not impossible, but that, like I say, we would need to get a published notice. It is possible, I would think more reasonable, Tuesday, the 20th, which would be the day before executive. We would have to amend the executive committee agenda. We just sent that out. We would have to amend it, which we can do. It's in an amended agenda. But that, yeah, so there's not a lot of time to pull off a special meeting in advance of executive on the 21st.
This is kind of dire need though, I think. Personally.
May I
So-
speak, please?
Sure.
From finance, we have the numbers ready to go. We did the costing on this for 2021 already. So I think formatting the budget adjustment to all the accounts wouldn't be an overburden at this time.
I would agree with Jane. We have it all ready to go. We just have to adjust how many months, because it was 6 months at this point, at that point. And now if we're saying it's gonna potentially happen in September, we would just adjust it to less than 6 months for the cost for this year.
What we're talking about is potentially happening being, if it's
Or
approved,
for July. yeah.
July. So the question would be, how long would it take to advertise and hire?
I mean, advertise could be, we could do the next day. Hiring is a different story, but I mean, I would say we'd probably put it in the budget adjustment to have people starting in August then.
Mhm.
I mean, it would be better to overinflate that than underinflate it for how much we wanted to adjust the budget, because if we miraculously hire all of them the first week in August, I'd rather have it in there. I think we could do that, Jane.
Well, realistically, it won't be until about the middle of August.
Yeah, the second 2 weeks in August.
Yeah,
Well,
Now, you don't have I mean, this is a discussion. It's not an action item for the committee right
Right.
now.
I'm just asking, you know,
Well,
your thoughts.
In terms
Yeah,
of
we
having
could-
a meeting.
Oh,
We
yeah,
can do a thumbs up if
Oh,
we
yeah,
want a
absolutely.
special meeting.
absolutely.
I'll be on the road.
We'll be
On
here.
the 20th. Again, we can, if you have your laptop, remote access will be a possibility. I don't know if it'll be convenient.
Driving, well, as long as you get it, are you good with?
Well, I was just gonna make a comment that on the 19th, which is Monday, there is an ADRC committee meeting here, so I don't know what you wanna.
Yeah, I think we're talking about Tuesday,
Tuesday.
the
I
20th.
Okay.
I can
because
pull
Yeah,
up,
there's
this-
nothing Tuesday.
We could try to
okay,
do
I
something.
can pull up the room schedule.
There's nothing scheduled for committee meetings on Tuesday.
Sounds good.
Jane, would you be available on Tuesday? And if so, at what time?
Things look flexible on my calendar. Monday is a bad day, but things are flexible on Tuesday. Mornings looks better for me, but again, I can adjust anything I need to.
10:30? With the whole day?
Well,
For a farm.
Yeah, I know.
as a special meeting, would anybody have an objection to it being earlier? I'm looking at things on my schedule as well.
I don't.
I don't.
Like 9 a.m., is that too
I can
early?
call you, Dave, if I would get you up.
Yeah,
I can do 9
I was
a.m.
up at 5 this morning. I could get here by.
I can
Oh,
make it
that's right.
work.
Kelly doesn't like early, but
I'm not a fan of early, but I can make it work.
9 o'clock?
You think it's a good idea too?
I certainly think it's worth having the meeting.
9 or 9:30. If one of them.
9 o'clock.
9
I
o'clock
will
Tuesday.
Send out the meeting notice.
Yeah, it's, it could be discussion. We haven't made a
Right.
decision.
No.
Yeah.
In fact, but you will list it as a recommendation.
Right.
The resolution, if this committee ends up recommending the budget adjustment, the resolution is an executive committee action.
Does that have to go through admin for,
The homemaker position exists. All we're doing is
oh,
adding,
okay.
so there's no need to adjust.
I checked with Heather on that one, to double check.
Hey, you've been doing your homework as usual.
Yeah, I don't think we could do the salary adjustment for that one, but we could do the homemaker.
Right.
Is there any other information or calculations that anybody wants included on that? Just want to make sure.
And my question is, do you want us to include Arrowhead being open?
I think you
Or-
should, the budget adjustment should account for the worst or best case scenario, however you want to characterize it, the maximum.
I would say yes, since we
Okay.
budgeted it open for the rest of everything else. And that's what we did in the original staff reporter on the staff report on the topic was we did everything since that's what 2021 was budgeted for, was it being open. So that it matches everything else in the year.
So when you
Okay.
get this information, will the cost of homemaker be included?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, if we do end up forwarding it with the recommendation to make the budget adjustment we wanted at the number that would be the max,
Yep.
which would be, and you know, if we come back and say, oh, we're going to spend less money, no one is going to be upset about that. Right.
All right. Anything else specifically about PM homemakers? Okay, I do have something under other, just since it came out after I sent out the meeting notice for this, but it is kind of in relation to this as well as overall budgeting related things. So as you're all aware, the governor did sign the budget last Thursday, which came for really good things for skilled nursing facilities. So as in last time the budget was signed, Medicaid rates are going to get an increase. We've talked about this a little bit over the last couple of months, but I've been very hesitant to say what's going to happen, as we all knew that there was a potential that it could be vetoed and we could get nothing. But it really did go the way that we wanted it to. So overall, the budget has $356 million being added into the Medicaid spend. So that is really good for skilled nursing facilities. Currently, our Medicaid rates are on average, since all three buildings has a different Medicaid rate, our average Medicaid rate is $227.57 a day. With this rate increase, the actual increase is 12%, so which is very nice. How it's calculated is a little bit different. Not every nursing home is going to get 12% of the increase. Since it's an 80-20 split between what the government gives and what's resident funded. It's a very complicated equation, but they're estimating that most facilities will get about 10%, which is $23 extra a day if we take our current Medicaid rates per resident. So, and we have 72 Medicaid residents right now. So of our 111 residents, 72 of which are Medicaid residents. So at that $23 extra a day, that's $604,440 a year. That will be added if we get that 10% increase. So that's another financial increase as well, since it's $1,656 at $23 times 365 days. So that's a good increase. We are, that's kind of the minimum increase we could get. Because we are a county-owned facility, we do expect to have a higher increase than, say, other facilities, since that increase is supposed to go to direct care costs. So on the Medicaid cost report, it is divided out into different segments that kind of get us that overall dollar amount. And one of the biggest segments is direct care costs, and that's what they're trying to increase the funding for. Because of that county benefit plan and that pension plan and the dollars we spend to staff our buildings, we have a higher direct care cost. So we could actually see closer to 13% increase. A 10% is what the state people, the associations and everything is kind of saying. If you're budgeting for, banking on, whatever it might be, look at 10%. 12% is the actual number, but based on what people from Leading Age and other associations have said, buildings that have a higher direct care cost, like county-owned facilities, are expected to see an even higher increase in that as well. So that's good news for once. Yeah.
It's not just good.
So that's a good positive thing, as well as so we're more likely to see a little bit higher rate, as well as this is backdated. So we won't really see these dollars until probably October is what they've estimated, but it does go into effect as of July. So we will get a lump sum payment in potentially October, that'll go all the way back to July of what our rates technically should have been at this point. So we will see increases at some point, and then also getting back paid for the time that we should have been increased at to today.
Very nice.
Way to save it for that last letter.
Yeah, and on a high note.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the only other thing I had under other, as we're talking about scheduling next week's special meeting, is I will actually not be here for our September meeting. So I was wondering if we could reschedule that to the week prior to when we were supposed to meet. I'm getting married 2 days after that meeting, so I won't be at work.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
About messed up priorities.
Yeah.
So I wanted to give plenty of time. So
That
it's
date
still,
would be week
Ninth?
before. I'm sorry.
or any other day. I'm just gone that Thursday, Friday of that week, and then the following week. So any day in the previous week or even the Tuesday of that week would be fine. Because our
Yeah.
scheduled meeting is the 16th.
The week before would be the 9th.
Yeah, I can't do that. I can't do the 9th. Sorry, I got another meeting.
Or
Also,
any-
if you have it later in the month, you'll have more accurate financials. Things will have been posted.
She's going on honeymoon.
yeah, I'll be
Yeah,
gone
that happened
until
last
the 29th.
What about Monday? What would that be?
The
The
13th.
13th? That's okay for you?
Mhm.
We're talking September, correct?
Yeah.
of September.
Works for me.
Kelly? Mike?
Yep.
Sarah?
Yep.
Steve? There we go.
Do it at 10:30.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, Carmen. Okay, on to 6A, which is the consideration of action. We all had a chance to read this. Would anyone like to add anything? Any questions on it? Carmen, you want to add anything or just speak on it, or
Sure,
are
I
we
can.
good to go?
I can briefly just speak on it. If you've all had a chance to read it, this is part of, it's the legislative agenda for the Neighbors Committee that would then also be included on the overall Dunn County legislative agenda. As always, Medicaid reimbursement is on there. Obviously, we did just have a really great increase, and hopefully that continues. How it's worded this year versus I think it was last year as well, is more of continued increases instead of knee-jerking needing a 12% increase, having a more consistent increase that keeps us at bay instead of having crisis after crisis and then have to fix it by a huge increase and then go back down again. So just more of a steady increase for that. And then the second agenda item on there is the CNA and nurse training, putting more money and effort into training programs for both CNAs and nurses. As we've talked about at length today, there is a shortage of them. And unfortunately, all of the colleges are full. It's not that there's not people that want to be CNAs and nurses, it's that there's not room for them. If you go to University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, for example, you need a 3.99 or higher GPA and perfect scores on everything, and you still might not get into the nursing program. It's just even my own experience. I had 4 college friends that went to school to be nurses, didn't make it into the program, changed their mind and went to be something else. So there's just simply not enough seats in the classroom for nurses, and that's why part of the reason why we're so short on nurses in the industry is because there's just not enough of them, and it's due to funding for the classrooms. It's also due to funding for teachers for the programs. People make more money being a nurse than teaching people how to be a nurse, so they don't go into that profession. So more funding towards the education programs for nursing is the other agenda item on there.
If I might, one
Yes.
thing I might suggest adding or rephrasing, one of the problems we're having with nursing programs in Wisconsin is essentially the Wisconsin university system has a non-compete set up. So the reason we don't have one at Stout is because we have one at Eau Claire. And
Yep.
if they were to, at least on a temporary basis, open up the other universities that are currently not allowed to have a nursing program, that might be a
Sure.
good way to alleviate some of the pressure on the system.
Sure.
I can add that in there.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
I didn't either.
That's very good.
Yeah, it's one of the strange things about the University of Wisconsin system. One of the reasons Stout has the majors it does is because it can't overlap in majors with River Falls or Eau Claire without special permission from the legislature.
I realize that.
Well, duplication.
Yep.
Yeah.
I learned that when I asked Stout to have a nursing program. I called them and said, well, might as well give it a shot and and they said, no, we can't. So
One question, if I may. Did you have on last year's request to allow county facilities to also have assisted living?
So that is actually a federal regulation, not a state regulation. So that was on a couple years ago, I believe. And then when we dug deeper into that regulation, that's actually a federal reg instead of a state reg. So it didn't, when I worked with Nick on writing the resolution and stuff for that, it didn't really fit into the state legislative ask.
Thanks.
Anybody else have any other comments?
Just one, if I may. On the first point regarding the Medicaid reimbursement, we said sustainable. Is there any way to further refine that recommendation? Is there a rubric or standard that we could say, it should be every biennium increased by a number equal to, and fill in the blank with respect to the increased costs experienced on average by nursing homes in Wisconsin? I mean, my point being that our legislators are not very imaginative. And if we just say sustainable, it isn't going to resonate. But if we give them a formula, if we say equal to this, that's something maybe they can wrap their heads around.
That is a good idea.
Put that nice, didn't you?
Yeah. Maybe they could.
That or the other way to, and I think that's a great way, just purely as another way to think about it is comparable with states with similar economic. Because I mean, one of the reasons we're in a hole is we're down at the bottom of the list. And just asking the legislators to get us up to comparable surrounding states would make a huge difference. And it's also a very concrete way.
So, yeah, and I wasn't wedded to my recommendation, but I do think something more precise than sustainable would be advisable.
Yeah, and either that or something, better than either of those suggestions would be great too.
Anything else? And hearing none, is there a motion to approve this with the changes that were made?
Yes, I'll approve it. I mean, I'll make the motion.
Seconded.
Motion made and second to approve the legislative agenda item. Is there any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carry.
Ryan, who was the second on that one?
I seconded it.
Kelly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, vouchers. Anybody have any questions on the vouchers? And hearing none, we'll get into Jane's financial report.
Okay.
Work.
On the aging report, our aging is stable as usual. We are fully staffed in the accounts receivable department. We were able to hire an experienced biller, which is great news. And our aging should be very stable from here on forward if our staffing is stable. Any questions on the aging? Next on my papers are the pool staff report. And as we've talked about before, there is no RN availability from the pool staff. So that's pretty much nothing. The average monthly cost for pool staff is declining to $138 instead of $188 that we saw last year. I again think that's, and Carmen would probably concur that that's because of availabilities.
I think it's two things. I think it's availability as well as invoice processing time. The people who are processing invoices, Paula, myself, and other nursing people are spending more time working on the floor, trying to help them than getting those processed necessarily. So they're processed in time, but it's also backed up a little bit. So the processing time to actually pay the billers before their due date kind of thing, but it's not becoming priority one and getting them in quite as fast as before.
Any questions on the pool staff report? The census split, the campus census, we are still seeing an increase in Medicaid as compared to what we had budgeted. Medicare is a little bit lower than budgeted, and private pay has not recovered. We're not seeing as much private pay. We're seeing more Medicaid clientele. Any questions on that? Then to the income statement. This month I focused on the total revenues. The month-to-date variance is negative 70,000, so we're down in revenues, of course, because Arrowhead is closed. And then the year-to-date budget, compared to budget, we're $600,000 lower in revenues. Then down on expenses, we did get the payroll, the COVID payroll bonus to post in June, and that's included in the costs. So some of these payroll accounts you'll see as over budget. Toward the bottom, we have the net income or loss as, well, the total expenses, let's go to that, of $708,537 is how far we're off in expenses compared with the amount of 605 in revenues that we're off. So we're still losing some money on a month-to-month basis. And the depreciation has been posted for 3 months, so that's included in those numbers. So we are paying that out of our budgeted numbers. 3 months have not been posted, so that's on that estimated depreciation line for April, May, and June. So then we get down to the net income with the accrued expenses of a negative 183,000. Now that includes all the COVID payout, the COVID expenses that we've incurred. And then I was able to calculate pretty closely all of our COVID expenses that we will be claiming, including the payroll retention bonus. So the estimated COVID reimbursement through June is $597,000, which leaves us in the good for $413,000. Questions? No questions. Okay.
Most did a good job, Chief.
Well, thank you. And I did make one correction up on the budgeted average daily census toward the top. That had been, I think, at 111. It should have said 123. We did budget a very aggressive budget. We budgeted as if COVID wasn't with us. That was the instruction. So we budgeted as, you know, as full as we could. So our budgeted census is off by, you know, quite a bit there. To actual, which we know.
Okay. Are there any questions? And hearing none, is there a motion to approve the vouchers and financial reports?
I so move.
Sarah? Steve second. Is there any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.